Hey dudes, and welcome back to the Bants. As always, I am your host, the Bants, and it's Monday, so it's time for our first What's Happening in Fashion this week, so let's just get right into it. And first up, we have our headlines for the day. And first up, and boy is this a doozy, Aaron Bondaroff of No Wave and former art gallery Oh Wow fame has just resigned or stepped down from both of those collectives, creatives, companies, whatever you want to call them, due to allegations of some pretty deep sexual shit. And with more than a handful of people coming out to clarify this, it's looking really fucking bad for him. And let me set this straight, I am in no way, shape, or form defending the guy. I mean, if you do stupid shit like this, you deserve every single fucking thing that gets thrown back at you. Doesn't matter how good your product is, doesn't matter how cool you are. If you're a fucking piece of shit, you get treated like a fucking piece of shit. Also, shoutouts to Rip and Dip and Joe's Jeans. You know why. Then, in much more uplifting news, a court decision finally came through in the 5 Points condo case. If you're not familiar with that, I'll give you a quick rundown. Basically, if you know anything about graffiti, there was a legendary spot in New York called the 5 Points condos where, some of the best graffiti from well over the years has been displayed for basically ever. But a couple years back, it was torn down, and a lot of the artists weren't really happy with that, and so they decided to basically sue for damages. And the courts came through and actually favored in the side of the artist, which is really fucking amazing, seeing as that these 21 artists in this case are all going to get a share of over $6 million. Really crazy stuff, and even though there's this idea that graffiti is never something that's going to last forever, this just proves that graffiti is art and worth its weight in gold. So, very cool overall. And lastly, just a quick little tidbit on the side as far as New York Fashion Week goes. I'm not going to be covering it in the WIF videos this time around, as I said previously, but what I'm going to be trying to do is put it into 1 or 2 videos on the side, so I don't know exactly how I'm going to do them yet, but look forward to those sometime this week as well. Alright, and with that, let's move on to our art stories for the day. And first up, famed street artist Invader recently had a trip to Bhutan, Tibet area, and posted some new photos of him doing some works in that area. And although some people have come to arms about it, seen as him kind of being disrespectful, disgraceful to, Buddhist temples and other historical architectural places such as that, from his perspective and from a lot of the locals' perspective, they seem to enjoy it, so I have no problem with it personally. And if you do want to see some kind of interesting pieces on some very old landscapes, definitely check this out. Then young artist CB Hoyo just started his first exhibit in London, and basically it's a play on not only other artists, but other streetwear brands in general. Basically, he just kind of laying into these fake silhouettes of things that have been done before by other famous people or brands. And although not the greatest art in the world, it is kind of funny and does remind me a little bit of how streetwear kind of used to be back in the day. So, I mean, if you're interested, definitely check it out. And if you happen to be in London, stop by as well. You might find it a little bit interesting. And lastly, Singapore's Art Science Museum just launched their newest exhibit called Art from the Streets, featuring a absolute slew of different street artists and graffiti artists, including but not limited to D-Face, Banksy, Invader, Shepard Fairey, Futura, Felipe Petone, and just a whole bunch of others. And even though many of us won't be able to make it to Singapore to see this exhibit, I would definitely check out some of the photos online. Very cool overall, and once again just shows how important street art is in the entirety of art culture nowadays. Alright, and then moving on into fashion, Guerilla Group showed off some of their spring-summer pieces for 2018, and although there's not a lot here, it is definitely very interesting. As I said before, they only really show off a couple pieces here, but let me explain why it is interesting. It's because they too now have hopped onto this denim techwear kind of scene that has slowly been creeping up. First, obviously, we saw with Raw Research, G-Star and Ator's collaboration. Then I believe North Face did a couple pieces, and I want to say somebody else did a couple pieces as well too, but I really can't remember it off the top of my head. But at the very least, you can definitely see that this Heritech movement is slowly making its way up, and I'm excited to say the least. Then Bape and Stamped came together for a new collaboration, and it's just not good. When you think about these two brands separately, you think about Bape, which has always been noisy and loud and colorful and vibrant. And when you think of Stamped, you think of clean and monochrome and minimalistic and simple-ish. And if the first thing that comes into your mind is that meshing these two together would make absolutely no sense, then boy does this collection prove you right. Like, who in their fucking right mind is gonna take the Bape logo, make it as small as possible, put it on literally a non-colored shirt, and then sell it for fucking more? Because that makes fucking sense. I mean, really, the only even somewhat interesting piece here is the full zip hoodie, which is literally just a Bape full zip hoodie with some cords off the end of it, which, wow, Stamped, that's really creative. I'm sure you didn't fucking steal that design from anybody, because nobody's ever done that shit before. So yeah, this is not worth your time. Doesn't matter how big of a Bape head you are, or a Stamped fan you are, this is not worth your time. Then Nosomnia released a Fall/Winter 2018 lookbook, and even though it takes definitely more than a glance, it's a little bit interesting. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean is that the first time I kind of looked at this lookbook, it really kind of seemed boring. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. A lot of men's contemporary brands nowadays tend to be kind of along that line, in the sense that it's not bad stuff. The quality is definitely there, the designs are definitely there, but it's really a lot of the same, and I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. But after taking this lookbook over more than a second glance, you do start to realize that they did put some very interesting details in here, whether it be just some design techniques or a little bit of smaller accessorizing here and there, or even some little tad bits of embroidery or stitching methods. Overall, it definitely won't be for everybody, but if you do find yourself a fan of fashion design, I would definitely give this a deeper look. It might, give you some interesting ideas. Then OlderBrother showed off their Spring/Summer 2018 lookbook, and honestly, it's pretty great. Now, once again, this lookbook won't be for everyone. There is definitely some very contemporary styles in here. There's definitely some very heritage silhouettes, things you might have seen more commonly during the workwear bubble. But what really makes this whole lookbook really fascinating is just the colors and how they came to be, using the dye methods that they chose to use, using flowers and insects and plants and things along those lines. If you find yourself a fan of Story MFG or anything along those lines, then this brand will be right up your alley, and I would definitely give this a look. Then Samizdat releases their Spring/Summer 2018 lookbook, and honestly, overall, they did a very good job with it. Yes, I will admit it, this lookbook, this whole season in general, doesn't really seem that much out of the mold of what pretty much everybody is doing nowadays. I'll be the first to admit that. But even so, coming from a streetwear background myself, I am, and probably always will be, a sucker for at least unique graphics, and at the very least they did do that here. But what I really want to give this brand props for is the fact that they did a lookbook, they did a season, and they actually fucking filled it out. Like, holy shit. There's short sleeves, there's long sleeves, there's jackets, there's a slew of accessories. It is actually a fucking season. It isn't just a hat, a shirt, and a sweater, a pullover, done, shot fucking 40 times and called a lookbook. No, this is 29 fucking photos of almost 29 pieces, if not more. So, all I gotta say is, if you're a young streetwear designer, check this out. This is how you're supposed to do a fucking lookbook. And lastly, Selfmade released their Fall Winter 2018 lookbook, and overall, I really enjoyed it. Now, I do have to say that this lookbook is a little bit all over the place, and would I wear most of it? I mean, probably not, but even so, just as somebody that really likes just technical aspects of design, there's definitely a lot of them here, be it an embroidery choice, or a textile choice, or just a little embellishment here or there, whether it be a piece of string hanging off of something, whether it be a differently done stitch line, whether it be just a different way of showing off a graphic or a type of text or anything along those lines. So at the very least, if you do consider yourself a fan of design in fashion design, I would at the very least check this out. Alright, and let's finally move on to our articles for the day. And first up, Racked put out a very great article titled East Africa Doesn't Want Your Hand-Me-Downs. And basically what it covers is a lot of the East African countries, whether it be like Kenya or Uganda, or mainly in this case Rwanda, how they have their own, clothing industries and their own ethically sourced materials, things along those lines, and how they want to be buying their own clothes because it helps the trade, it helps the economy, and how everything that we kind of pass on to them, it's just oversaturated. And it even goes into things like how a lot of Chinese factories built up in the area and how they're undercutting people from Rwanda that are selling their own goods. Really interesting article overall, and if you're a fan of just, once again, the socioeconomic behavior of the fashion industry, especially in international areas, definitely give this article a read. Then the BBC put out a very interesting article on why there's a downtrend in used clothing. And they go into a couple different reasons. They go into just people following trends, just quality of products, and a couple other reasons as well. And they even talk to some people that do recycling methods and how they're getting hit by all of it on top of used goods store owners. Really interesting article, especially if you're into kind of what happens when a fad dies or a trend dies. And I think everybody should give this sort of thing a read. Then Highsnobiety put out a nice little article called Why Are Designers So Obsessed with Americana Right Now? And they kind of go into it a little bit, but really what it comes down to is just the ever-changing trends and tide of fashion. I mean, it's already been pretty much close to a decade since workwear was back in. And so, I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't happen now. But if you're kind of new to fashion, I would definitely give this article a read. It might open your eyes a little bit more to just the never-ending cyclical cycle that is fashion, really. And lastly, 1843 magazine put out a nice, quick, just little article on the more philosophical side of things about how style isn't really necessarily something that anyone can measure. It's all really relative overall. And they give a couple quirky little examples here and there. But if you're the kind of person that has trouble kind of finding your own style, or tends to think more about what others think, I would give this a read. It might help calm you down a little bit. Alright guys, and with that, we've reached the end of our first whiff of the week. Hope you guys have enjoyed as per usual. And also, as always, I have linked all the articles I have talked about today in the description in case you want to read a little bit more about them or see some more photos. or whatever really. And as for videos this week, I don't really know how many I'm going to do. At the very least, you will get your 2 whiffs in there today and probably Friday. And then more than likely, I'm going to put out 1 or 2 videos on New York Fashion Week as well. So keep an eye out for those. Alright guys, and with that, thank you as always for enjoying my content. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or just want to talk in general, feel free to leave a comment down below. And as always, dudes, have a good couple days, and until next time.